President Vladimir Putin's claim that he was left with no choice but to take military action in Ukraine.
I'm driven to conclude that Putin was always determined to attack his neighbour, no matter what we did. Now we see him for what he is, a blood-stained aggressor who believes in imperial conquest.
Former US National Security Advisor John Bolton says the West's response now will be crucial for global stability.
And I certainly hope that the US, the UK, the European Union and others really do impose the strictest, harshest sanctions they can. Because if they fail to do that, Putin won't learn the right lesson, and neither will others.
Well, thousands of people are trying to flee Ukraine as it comes under attack. Paul Hawkins reports now on the mass exodus.
First came the warnings. From Kharkiv to Kiev. The bombs fell.
First of all, I heard a terrible, terrible explosion of unbelievable power. Then I jumped up. I didn't know where to go. Panic kicked in. I ran outside. My windows are both towards the yard and Vaskoviska Street. All car alarms started ringing.
The alternative was hiding. This was a bomb shelter in Kharkiv. And then, the exodus. Ukrainians turning into refugees overnight. This man said he was fetching the children to take them to safety. It's horrible. What can one think, he said, adding, evil man, damn him.
Russia will not stop what they've started. Forget brotherly nations. This is a stab in the back, which we expected. Things were heading that way for some time.
If not by car, then escaping by plane.
We were told that the flight had been cancelled because of escalation of war in Ukraine. But no one is helping us now. No one is telling us what happened, what will happen to our flight, what should we do, where to go. We have no place to go to.
And that's why so many people are heading towards the border with Poland, if necessary, by foot.
And how are you feeling now?
Oh, just shattered, not for myself, I don't care about my own safety, I care about Ukraine.
She has family.
And Ukrainians. I'm of Ukrainian heritage, and to see this happening to the country is just devastating.
But some are staying put, stockpiling food or blood. Not for the troops, but for people sleeping in their homes when the bombs fell. From keep calm and carry on, the message now, be brave and fight.
We're already handing out weapons, and we'll hand out them to defend our country to everyone who wants and has the capacity to defend our sovereignty. The future of Ukraine depends on every citizen.
The odds are against them. But Ukrainians have fought the Russians before. For those of a certain age, this will be nothing new. Paul Hawkins, GB News.
A juror from the Ghislaine Maxwell trial is going to be questioned under oath by a US judge. It's after he told journalists he used his own experience of sexual abuse to convince the other jurors to convict Maxwell. The 60-year-old socialite was jailed for trafficking for the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The judge has rejected a bid by her lawyers to order a new trial. To some other news now, and all remaining COVID restrictions in England have now been lifted. That means people who test positive with the virus no longer legally have to isolate. It's part of the Prime Minister's Living with COVID strategy, which also includes scrapping universal testing from April. The Queen has cancelled more planned virtual engagements today following her COVID diagnosis last week. Other virtual meetings were cancelled earlier this week, with the monarch still suffering with mild cold-like symptoms. Buckingham Palace says Her Majesty will continue with light duties. Students starting university in September will now have to start paying back their loans as soon as they earn more than £25,000 a year. That's part of the government's response into the Orgar review, which looks into funding within higher education. The current threshold for repaying student loans is just over £27,000. And the UK has pledged £160 million to speed up the development of vaccines against deadly diseases. The funding will go towards preparing for future epidemics, with an aim to slash the time it takes to make a vaccine to 100 days. That's a third of the time it took to develop the first COVID jab. It will also help with developing further vaccines to protect against future COVID-19 strains. Well, let's get more on the UK's response to the Russian invasion in Ukraine.
Shortly after 4 o'clock this morning, I spoke to President Zelensky of Ukraine to offer the continued support of the UK, because our worst fears have now come true and all our warnings have proved tragically accurate. President Putin of Russia has unleashed war in our European continent. He's attacked a friendly country without any provocation and without any credible excuse. Innumerable missiles and bombs have been raining down on an entirely innocent population. A vast invasion is underway, by land, by sea, and by air. And this is not in the infamous phrase, some faraway country of which we know little. We have Ukrainian friends in this country, neighbours, co-workers. Ukraine is a country that for decades has enjoyed freedom and democracy and the right to choose its own destiny. We and the world cannot allow that freedom just to be snuffed out. We cannot and will not just look away. It's because we've been so alarmed in recent months at Russian intimidation that the UK became one of the first countries in Europe to send defensive weaponry to help the Ukrainians. Other allies have now done the same, and we will do what more we can in the days ahead. Today, in concert with our allies, we will agree a massive package of economic sanctions designed in time to hobble the Russian economy. And to that end, we must also collectively cease the dependence on Russian oil and gas that for too long has given Putin his grip on Western politics. Our mission is clear. Diplomatically, politically, economically, and eventually militarily, this hideous and barbaric venture of Vladimir Putin must end in failure. And so I say to the people of Russia, whose president has just authorized a tidal wave of violence against a fellow Slavic people, as the parents of Russian soldiers who will lose their lives, I cannot believe this is being done in your name, or that you really want the pariah status it will bring to the Putin regime. And I say to the Ukrainians in this moment of agony, we are with you. We're praying for you and your families, and we are on your side. And if the months ahead are grim and the flame of freedom burns low, I know that it will blaze bright again in Ukraine, because for all his bombs and tanks and missiles, I don't believe that the Russian dictator will ever subdue the national feeling of the Ukrainians and their passionate belief that their country should be free. I say to the British people and all who have heard the threats from Putin against those who stand with Ukraine, we will of course do everything to keep our country safe. We're joined in our outrage by friends and allies around the world. We will work with them for however long it takes to ensure that the sovereignty and independence of Ukraine is restored. Because this act of wanton and reckless aggression is an attack not just on Ukraine, it's an attack on democracy and freedom in Eastern Europe and around the world. This crisis is about the right of a free, sovereign, independent European people to choose their own future. And that is a right that the UK will always defend.
Well, meanwhile, in the last half hour, US President Joe Biden says claims by the Kremlin that it took military action after being threatened by Ukraine and NATO are simply absurd.
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia. This is going to impose severe cost on the Russian economy, both immediately and over time.
Well, on TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Michelle.
Well, hello there. What a treat for you. No, I am not Nigel Farage. I am, in fact, Michelle Dewberry. We've just lost our connection to Nigel. So in the meantime, you have the pleasure of my company. Let's cross now to Lord Dannett, the former head of the British Army. Lord Dannett, good evening to you.
Hello, Michelle. Good evening. Yes, it's definitely you and not Nigel Farage. I can spot that.
Hey, I can tell you I'm much better looking than Nigel Farage, so it's definitely me. Now, let me start on this Ukraine situation. Now, everything has escalated incredibly quickly over the last 24 hours. Has this moved in the way that you would have been expecting it to?
Short answer is no. I thought that sufficient effort had been made to persuade Vladimir Putin that if he was to make this move against Ukraine, it would be so much not in his interest, and so particularly not in the Russian people's interest, that actually he would have the wit not to do this. But clearly, in his bunker mentality within the Kremlin, more than 20 years leading Russia, he's actually lost the plot. And he is now so taken up with his own importance and his own mission, his own belief that Ukraine is a spiritual part of Russia, that he's defied logic, and he has ordered the attack that he did at 6 o'clock this morning, and he is dooming himself and, for the time being, the Russian people into the bottom drawer of international history. Frankly, state-on-state warfare, such as we're seeing now, should have ended in the middle of the 20th century, and he's now revised it in the most vile fashion, and he deserves to be pilloried for the monster that he is, and frankly pitied for drawing the Russian people into the same quagmire in which he hopefully is shortly to drown.
And let's bring it to here in Britain. What should we be doing next?
Well, we should certainly be doing what our Prime Minister is saying and the Leader of the Opposition is saying, is putting in place the most severe economic sanctions that imaginative minds can put in place. We've got to absolutely cripple the Russian economy, cripple Russian oligarchs wherever they are, particularly in this country. We've got to throw out Russians in this country who have no place to be here. We've got to stop them spending their money in this country in ways that are not appropriate. And then going beyond that, we've got to place Russia into the pariah league in international relations. No more Russians attending diplomatic conferences, no more Russians attending seminars, no more Russians hosting international sporting events. Russia has put itself beyond the pale, and if the Russian people don't like it, they've got to look purely at Vladimir Putin and think to themselves, do we really want to be led by this monster? Frankly, I hope that quite quickly the majority of Russian people will come to their senses and believe that they've got to get rid of this monster who is doing them untold destruction and pushing them back in history by years, if not by decades.
Lord Dannett, I mean, you reference Putin there as a monster, but I'm sure as well we can agree that actually he's also a smart man. And we talk about sanctions and what we should do next, but surely Putin would have factored these things in already before he made a calculated decision to do what he's done over these last 24 hours.
He has been following a plan since 1989, when his beloved Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact was destroyed by the cohesion of the West as the Cold War ended. Scraped Vladimir Putin to the core and you find an unreconstructed KGB colonel whose life was destroyed in 1989. His life since then has been fashioned entirely to get power and control of Russia and to build a way that he can promote disharmony and disunity in the West, hopefully break up NATO and gradually restore Russia to the powerful place that in his mind it should be. Now, we're slightly to blame for this because I think in many ways we moved too quickly to bring Eastern European countries back into the Western fold, into the European Union and into NATO, perhaps overlooking the fact of the special place that Ukraine has had in many Russian people's hearts. And that's why at this moment in time, quite properly, Ukraine is not a member of NATO. But that doesn't explain the expansionist, interventionist, incursive situation that Vladimir Putin is currently putting his Russian people through and trying to crush Ukraine in both territory and in spirit and in people. This is quite unacceptable in the 21st century.
And Lord Danner, I mean, many viewers will be at home watching this, feeling actually quite afraid at the moment and apprehensive about what the next coming days, weeks, perhaps months might look like. Do you think there's any threat at all that the British may be getting involved militarily, boots on the ground anywhere, etc.?
No, we won't be getting involved with boots on the ground in Ukraine. We've been quite clear about that, and quite properly that is the correct policy, because Ukraine is not a NATO member. Yes, we've been supporting Ukraine over the years with training and with weapons, and we will go on supporting Ukraine's fight to be independent and to defend its sovereign territory. Where British soldiers, armed forces personnel, are likely to be involved in greater numbers is supporting our NATO allies in countries like Lithuania, Latvia, and particularly Estonia, and in Poland, who have common borders with Russia. That's important. But the other thing that the British people have got to be prepared to understand is that there are economic consequences for all of us. We're already seeing energy prices soaring, and they will soar further. This will have an effect on the cost of living. So this isn't a fight that's free for implications for ourselves. We're all going to have to pay a price in this. And if we don't like it, then frankly, the target, the bullseye for your disappointment and unhappiness, whoever's watching this, it's Vladimir Putin and the way that he has led the Russian people, the majority of whom are now heartily fed up with him. And they've got to find the moral courage to throw him out, to let Russia get back on a better track and eventually, over time, join a better common European home of people.
The former head of the British Army there, fascinating hearing from you. Thank you very much for your insight tonight. Now, also keeping me company, we've got Jonathan Steele. You're the former Moscow correspondent as well for The Guardian, international affairs journalist. What do you make then to what Lord Danner was saying?
Well, I'm glad he said that Britain is not going to send troops and shouldn't send troops, because that would really risk a real confrontation between countries that are nuclear armed. Because obviously the British wouldn't go in unless the Americans were going in. We usually follow the Americans when it's a military issue like this. That would be terrible to have American and Russian troops facing each other, shooting each other, killing each other, possibly bringing in nuclear weapons at some later stage. So that's good. The rest of what Lord Danner said is, I agree with it very much. I don't think, though, there's any chance that the Russian people are going to topple President Putin. It's not that kind of regime where people have uprisings and topple leaderships at the moment. Putin has the situation very much under control. And for some people, initially at least, this will be quite a popular thing that he's done, because they feel that the Ukrainians were part of Russia and they've split away from Russia, betrayed Russia in some sort of psychological way by becoming so pro-Western. So initially, I think many Russians will support this, as they did, in fact, when the Crimea was taken over. But I think as time goes on and there's the costs of this intervention and this invasion increase, then people, and especially if Russian troops and young men get killed in uniform, there will be a cost to pay, and people at home will be unhappy.
Yeah, and I mean, you say about young men in uniform getting killed, but you know, the people bearing arms right now in Ukraine, they're not just young men bearing uniform, they're your average member of the public. I mean, we spoke earlier on in my programme to a member of the Ukrainian parliament. He said, they're basically arming anyone that wants to stand up and defend Ukraine. He himself was saying that he's got an AK-47. This is a rapidly escalating situation, and one that's going to have bloodshed on both sides.
No, that's true. But on the other hand, in addition to the young man that you were mentioning, the MP, there are thousands who are fleeing the country, who are running away in panic, and are not surprised either. And I think we must be sure that we've got humanitarian aid in place in Moldova, in Poland, other countries around Ukraine to help people who are fleeing, the refugees, because this it's a disaster to have to leave your country and flee like that, uncertain what's going to happen next.
Indeed. Well, what is going to happen next? That is the question. You can get in touch with us and let us know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk. But for now, I'm going to take a quick break. And when we come back, you should be joined by Nigel Farage.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, he's done it. It is an all-out assault on Ukraine. It is truly, truly horrible. It is awful, and it leaves the West having to make some very big decisions. I absolutely accept that I got this wrong last week. I did not think Putin would do this at this time. I certainly don't hold back on what I've been saying for years. In 2014, I pretty much said, if we go on prodding the Russian bear, we'll get a reaction. Little did I know then quite how bad it would actually be. Boris Johnson has responded, world leaders have responded. I thought Boris Johnson actually did look and sound like a Prime Minister today. And he's put on some very, very tough sanctions. And he's announced that Europe will, in time, not take gas and oil from Russia. Well, that's all well and good, but there's a slight problem here. The last time I looked, crude oil was trading at $105 a barrel. And the consequence of much of what we're doing means that actually ordinary families are going to pay one hell of a price for what's happened here too. I'm also concerned that this could drive Putin ever closer towards China as he seeks an alternative market in the medium to long term for his gas, and probably a very willing market for his gas and for his oil. But what Johnson did say today is that we were prepared to use military means. He didn't say how, he didn't say when, but he said we're prepared to use military means. To be clear, Ukraine is not a member of NATO, but Poland, Estonia, other countries like that. Let's just say that Putin was to go into those areas. Would NATO stand strong? Well, Is NATO actually ready to fight? That's my question today. Farage at GBNews.uk. And it all depends, I think, on one thing. It depends on American leadership. It doesn't matter how many countries join NATO, in one sense, because America is by far the biggest. It's only with American leadership that NATO can be strong. And of course, as you all know, the withdrawal from Afghanistan last year has raised many, many serious questions. Well, I'm joined by Congressman Andy Biggs from the desert state of Arizona. Andy, we've been asking ourselves a big question since the fall of Kabul. And since kind of this America is back, Joe Biden appeared to in fact to have gone the other way. I know a huge number of Americans, Ukraine will seem just so far away from their lives, it's not true. I can also see some American commentators saying, hey, World War I, World War II, America paid a huge price. Where does America stand with NATO right now?
Well, right now, Americans, if you were to poll the majority of Americans, they wouldn't know where Ukraine was. They wouldn't see the immediate necessity of getting involved, and certainly not militarily putting men and women in harm's way from the U.S. I think the leadership, though, is that you could provide aid, military goods, and weaponry to the Ukraine. I think that's kind of where they are. The reality is, though, this administration has been utterly feckless on foreign policy, and its weakness is actually emboldened, and this is why this is so critical. It's emboldened Putin to act. It's emboldened Kim Jong-un in North Korea to act. It's emboldened the Ayatollah in Iran to act. But really, does it add to the imperilment of Taiwan from China? So you have a whole set of secondary and tertiary effects that are waiting to see what happens here with Putin. The question is, how far into Ukraine is Putin going to drive? He wants the whole country back, and it's a sovereign state.
Yeah, and there's no doubt. I mean, those eastern provinces, the Russian-speaking eastern provinces, have a very different view of the world than Kiev and the rest of Western Ukraine. I think you're right in terms of troops. I can't see NATO members putting troops into the Ukraine. Maybe we could even go as far as airstrikes. I don't know. But the point going on from that, if NATO territory was to be attacked, does NATO still maintain its founding aims from the late 1940s? And is America going to provide that leadership, or think again? I mean, let me ask you a question. Would America go to war over Estonia?
I don't think so.
Really?
I really don't think so. I mean, look, there are ways you can get at this, and your Prime Minister Johnson is talking about oil and gas is important. But that's more of a midterm resolution to this issue. Yes. And so if the Biden administration wanted to bring pressure to bear, they would unleash the American energy sector. What would happen is it's a twofer for the world. Price of oil would come down so the economies would improve. And on the other hand, Putin really needs oil and gas to be about 60, 65 bucks a barrel to be able to fund his government and fund his military intervention. If you flood the world with gas and oil, you have a chance to bring that down,
yes,
and that hurts him.
Yeah, no, I get that. I understand that. Yeah. But just to repeat that point, so you basically think that if Estonia, which is NATO territory, was invaded, that America would probably not go to war?
If you mean by going to war, put men and women on the ground there, I don't see it.
Andy Biggs, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for joining me. Well, interesting words, because that's actually where we're going to be, isn't it? I'm not saying for a moment that Putin is going to go into Estonia or Poland, but we do need to think about the Western Alliance. We do need to think really, really hard about NATO, about its future. And I think Joe Biden, who hasn't been very much to the fore in the last few days, I think Joe Biden has got some very, very big questions to answer. Now, some of your reaction coming in, and the question is NATO prepared to fight? Stephen says, NATO won't fight. That is why Putin is doing what he's doing, and the West is too scared to challenge him, or China for that matter. And I'm very worried that this does drive Putin closer to China. I'm very worried about how bellicose China has been about Taiwan, including today on Chinese state TV. And that actually is why I do think we need America to step up. I do think America needs to say, you know what, we're going to protect the integrity of NATO, but we heard there from a serving congressman doubts, and I've heard other doubts in this hall this morning. Ian says, the Western powers seem to have forgotten Ukraine was promised protection from Russia in return for decommissioning their substantial nuclear weapons. What does this say about the UK, Europe and the USA? Well, on that theme of broken promises, you're absolutely right. Ukraine did give up its nuclear weapons back in the 1990s, and we did give a protection, a promise of protection. Equally, when the Berlin Wall came down, we made promises to Russia that NATO would not move an inch further to the east. So there have been, a whole series of broken promises. Kevin says NATO is a defensive power and will only fight when attacked. Well, will it? And that's the big question that I'm raising. Now, earlier on, I went around the conference hall this morning speaking to a mixture of delegates from all different parts of the USA, one Brit who came over for the conference as well. Let's see what their reactions were to these really big and fundamental questions.
So overnight, the news, big attack on the Ukraine. We're NATO members, we're looking to American leadership. What should NATO do? Should we fight?
It's tough, Russia's a nuclear superpower, so it's tough to fight Russia without it being World War III, when Trump was in office, this kind of stuff wasn't happening, but, now Biden's in office after Afghanistan, we're not really taken seriously anymore, so they don't fear us like we used to, so it's tough.
NATO needs to stand and fight. Absolutely. We need to get Germany and the EU all involved. America needs to be there to lead, but we need to see the EU step up first. And then if American troops or anything like that are needed, it's because we're following the EU, not that we're leading our military in first. Because I really do believe this is Europe's problem before it's America's problem.
I think what America needs at this moment in time is leadership. And there is no leadership in the United States in terms of what to do next.
I think so. This is against NATO. This is against everything. This is awful. If we let them get away with this, we don't have any hope. I'm serious. Then, China's going to take Taiwan. It's just going to be one thing after another. So we're very, very concerned.
Do you think if Donald Trump was president, this would all be happening?
Definitely not.
Well, some very strong opinions there. A lot of people in this hall saying if Donald Trump was president, this wouldn't be happening. And I do tend to agree with that view because I don't think Afghanistan would have happened. And I think it's that weakness that Putin is probing at, going further, indeed, today than probing. Now, another story, a domestic story from home. We know that 24,500 people crossed the English Channel in boats last year, small boats last year. I've been saying all the way through this that the vast majority were young, undocumented males. Well, we've got some updates on the percentages that were young males, and indeed, I believe, the figures we were told aren't right. I'm joined by Alp Mehmet, chairman of Migration Watch. Alp, good evening. I'm not hearing you, Alp.
Good evening, Nigel. Good evening. I can hear you.
Good evening. Alp, good. Just run us through the figures that are wrong and what the percentage of those coming were young men.
Something like 80% of those crossing in boats from the other side of the channel, we've known all along that they are young men under 40, between the ages of, say, 25 and 40, maybe a bit younger. The other thing that I would say is that these figures, why they are so shocking, is the fact that the numbers appear to have gone way, way up on 2019. Now, 2019 was before the pandemic, and 2021, we were still under some sort of lockdown at various times in the year. So we've had all these increases in work, in those coming here to work, those coming here to study, those coming for family reasons, those coming to work in the fields, to the seasonal workers. It's gone up by something like 4 times over what it was. So it's the fact that at a time when figures should really have been coming down, they've shot up. And this is not what the people of this country were told would happen during the 2019 election campaign. That's what's worrying about it.
Yeah, but also, Alp, I mean, the figures, they've revised the figures up. How can we believe anything we're being told in terms of numbers, particularly as we now know they're going to try and stop issuing daily figures? How can we believe anything they tell us?
Well, that's an extremely good point, if I may say so, Nigel. That is absolutely right. We've been told that we're not going to know what's happening in the channel, how many are crossing, until probably April. We're going to get quarterly figures. And that is a nonsense, frankly. Of course, we need to know what is going on a daily basis. The reason why the government doesn't want us to know on a daily basis is because they can hide them in figures of the sort that we've had today. And that's why we've started a campaign. We've started a petition, as you know, Nigel, that we must get the government to pull back from this nonsense of trying to keep us in the dark about what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Al, Mehmet, thank you very much indeed for joining me. And one little story here that really shows you that the West is going mad. It's my What the Farage moment, that from MI5, MI6 and GCHQ, the people that work in those organisations are being told they must reconsider their white privilege. Yes, that's right. They must get deep down into the culture wars, realise what dreadful people they are. And really, when you think about it, why are all these things happening when we're on the verge of the worst outbreak, perhaps we're even in the worst outbreak of conflict in Europe since 1945? And this is what we obsess with. I tell you what, they must be laughing their socks off in the Kremlin and in Beijing. In a moment, joining me for Talking Pints, Donald Trump Jr.'s fiancée, former Fox News presenter, former advisor to President Trump, Kimberly Guilfoyle. Back with you in a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, it's Talking Pints American CPAC style. I'm joined by Kimberly Guilfoyle. Kimberly, welcome to Talking Pints. Now, before we get on to hard politics and big global events and big questions about America's leadership in the world that are being asked, really interesting. You're engaged to Donald Trump, Jr. What people at home in the UK might not know is you were previously married to Gavin Newsom, who is quite a left-wing liberal, governor of California.
That's true.
How does a marriage work between people of such different views?
Well, you know, it's interesting because I've always been a registered Republican. Since I was 18 years of age, I was part of the Young Republicans in college at UC Davis. So I've never wavered in my conservative beliefs and principles. And, you know, Gavin knew that, Don knows that, and Don Jr. says, hey, what can I say? She's everybody's type. Right? Drink to that. Drink to that.
Well, that's not a bad thing to drink to. I mean, fair enough. Kimberly, you've been very, very close, you know, through your Fox News days and on and after that. You've been very, very close to the Trump family.
Yes.
And we're here at CPAC. Donald Trump speaking on Saturday. Do you think he's ready to have another run at the presidency?
I can only hope so. I think America is just really, honestly, so starved for leadership. Right now, when you look at what's happening in terms of, you know, globally, what's happening in Ukraine, what happened in Afghanistan, that is the absence of leadership that allowed this to happen. Mark my words, as true as we sit here, if Donald Trump was president of the United States, we would not be doing this in Ukraine. We would not have had that abysmal failure and loss of American intelligence and life and all the equipment that we had in Afghanistan left behind because we have someone who's a feckless leader in the White House. And people want to take their country back.
If Donald Trump was to become the 47th president, let's say, and Putin, having dealt with Ukraine, was to move into Estonia or Poland, under Donald Trump, would NATO send troops and honour those NATO promises?
Well,
because
NATO should do that, but Donald Trump was one person that actually, you know, held NATO to their principles and to their obligations. That's for sure. We were actually talking about it last night. We hosted an event for the Super PAC, Make America Great Again, and we said to the president, God willing, if you would be so noble to serve again and help this country and bring it back to what it needs to be. And that means respect. Respect globally across the board. Because right now, foreign countries, at least, they don't respect the United States. We see this in China. We see this in Russia. We see it happening across the globe.
I get that. But most Americans with historic memories of the massive cost of World War II and indeed World War I to America, I bet a lot of Americans are saying, hey, Ukraine, what's it got to do with us? And if it came to Estonia or Poland, wouldn't lots of Americans say, is this really our business?
Well, sure, there's people that would say this isn't something for us to get involved in and really prefer to be more isolationist. But Donald Trump is a principled man, a man of morals and ethics that would say, listen, we got to do what we need to because we hold this place on the world stage to make sure that we can actually have peace through strength. But what Donald Trump does, he's not a warmonger. He's not somebody trying to get us involved in needless and endless conflicts on foreign land that are untenable. This is somebody that says, let's sit down at the table with these people, let's go through this, let's make sure and assert what the American position is on this, that we won't stand for it, and the very thought, in fact, that they know that Donald Trump is a man of action. When pushed, will do the right thing and, in fact, go ahead and protect human life and dignity. I believe firmly that if he comes back in and we're able to get him elected again, and he's able to win again, that people will understand that, and we wouldn't be presented with these things of, okay, now we've got to decide whether we go to war because they're going to invade, you know, Poland or Estonia, all of the above. That's the problem. He actually believes in stopping it before it gets to that critical crisis point. You know, we had no loss of life, you know, in 18 months in Afghanistan under President Trump, and then look what happened when President Trump wasn't in the White House.
Now, there Republican Party. 2020 was a bad time. In the end, after the special election in Georgia, you lost control of the Senate. The House had gone, albeit by a very, very small margin. The presidency had gone. And now it's midterms coming up, and all the polls say that actually it's going to be a good year for the Republicans. Red wave. They're going to take back the House comfortably, pick up some seats in the Senate, and all the rest of it. But I tell you what is interesting. A lot of this crowd, this CPAC crowd, these are very much Donald Trump supporters. And, indeed, your fiancé, Don Jr., says it's now Donald Trump's Republican Party. He's reshaped the party. It's much less country club than it used to be. It's much more ordinary working people than it used to be.
Forgotten men and women, and that's the party of Donald Trump, because he actually built a big tent to include all Americans and people that believed in actual, equality of opportunity, not necessarily a result, but giving everybody a chance, saying, hey, I'm going to make sure that you have more discretionary spending, decide what you're going to do with your money instead of letting the government waste it, build up the economy, infrastructure, manufacturing, jobs, builds made here in America. These are very strong America First principles. They worked before. He built the strongest economy that this country has ever seen, and I'm quite confident that he will do it again. And I'll tell you something on a personal note. He couldn't look better, be more robust, have more energy, and it's quite remarkable to see in person. So if anybody has any question about that, the juxtaposition, when you see someone so feeble, so incapable, so lacking of any kind of intelligence and ability to function on a daily basis, Joe Biden compared to the robust strength.
I don't read that in the New York Times.
They
say
Trump.
he's doing they say Biden's doing a great job.
Great job. Terrific. Yeah, exactly.
Kimberly, something's going on here. It's interesting. I talked about this crowd, the realignment of the Republican Party, different kinds of people, and maybe one or two of the suburban types now not voting Republican in the way they used to. That shift that's gone on, and we've seen it with Brexit too in the United Kingdom. But we're in Florida. There's a governor here called Ron DeSantis. He has done what I think an heroic job. Not going along with the hysteria of locking down, Florida being kept relatively free, completely unlike California, which became, LA became a ghost town, etc. At the end of the day, DeSantis has come out of this. I'm pleased to say England are following. We've now dropped all restrictions, which is great. But there's a lot of people like Ron DeSantis. A lot of people think Ron DeSantis could be the man for 2024. And there's no getting away from that. Here at this CPAC. How is the relationship between Trump and DeSantis?
I think the relationship is good. President Trump has been incredible to Governor DeSantis, and I think is really, in so many ways, largely responsible for the great victory that Ron DeSantis enjoyed here in Florida. I see Ron DeSantis employing the same principles and beliefs, ideas that Donald Trump put forward, and this is Donald Trump's Republican conservative party. And God bless. Welcome to anybody else to, run in the future. But if President Trump chooses to run, he will win the primary. He will win the election. Make no mistake about it.
Kimberly, there's no greater Trump cheerleader in the world.
I know him for 16 years, so I know what I'm talking about. He's an incredible man. He's unbelievably smart. And for the people that say he doesn't read or pay attention to stuff, they don't know what they're talking about. Get him out of here.
You stand,
the guy's on
and
point.
I've watched you, Kim. I've watched you standing on the platforms, and it's all. And you've done political advice. You've done television presenting.
Finance, they're all of the above. I don't do anything that I don't believe in and that I didn't do my homework and totally
I get it.
Through.
So, when are you going to run for office?
You know what? I love this country. I've been incredibly blessed.
I didn't ask
I'm living and breathing the American dream.
I didn't ask any of that. When are you running?
My father from Ireland, right? Amazing. Ennis County Clare. My mother from Puerto Rico. So, listen, all things are possible in life. I never say no. There's always chapters, but right now I'm super focused on saving this country. And I think there's only one path to save America, and that's Donald J. Trump.
Well, you can't call Kimberly Guilfoyle indecisive. You can agree with her, you can disagree with her, you know where she stands, but she completely avoided my question about when she's running. Of course she's going to run for office at some point. Kimberly, thank you for joining me.
Cheers to you, my great
on
friend.
Talking Pikes. Thank you very much indeed. Now, we've got a few minutes left on the programme, and it's time for Barrage the Farage. And you send in your questions, and I do not get pre-sight of these. It's not allowed. So here goes. And I may bring Kimberly back in if I need some help. I may well need it. One viewer asks me, do you think the Chinese will now make their move on Taiwan whilst the West are focused on Russia invading Ukraine? I think, you know what? I think Putin is, of course, a threat to peace because of this greater Russia view that he wants to build. But I don't believe for one moment that Putin poses a threat to Germany or France or the United Kingdom. That's not within him. I do actually think there are elements of this Chinese Communist Party hell-bent on global domination, whether that's economic, whether that's military. Taiwan's pretty scary, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think, this is the perfect storm of what's happening here, just coalescing in terms of the power struggles. They're going to take an opportunity. Why wouldn't you, right? It's a path of least resistance now with Biden in office. Now is the time for them to strategically move in to take advantage.
Which is why we need to show unity and strength in the West, given what has happened.
Correct.
Right, Mark asks me, can you name one public sector service that is run well? We used to run the biggest empire, wash my mouth out with soap and water, not supposed to discuss that anymore. We used to run the biggest empire in the world with about 50,000 civil servants and a few soldiers. I mean, I can't think any country ever has been better at administration and at order than the British used to be. And now we have millions of people in the civil service, all of whom, of course, love working from home. Work from home, take Fridays off in future, and we go on paying them remarkably well, and they get wonderful final salary pensions. And I hope Jacob Rees-Mogg shakes up the civil service, because nothing in our public sector works properly anymore, and it's dreadful. Gosh, I got quite worked up there.
Yeah, good.
Joe asks, would you meet Putin to persuade him to retreat from the Ukraine? If so, what would you say? I would say to Putin that I accept that we haven't kept our promises since 1990, that we have extended too far east, but what's done is done. If he continues with this course, he will find himself in the end cut on the SWIFT payment system. He will find himself in the end becoming totally dependent on China. And in the end, if China is where he raises his money, where he issues bonds, if it's China where he's selling his gas and selling his oil, it may get him out of short-term problem with the West, but in the end, China would have him for breakfast. And that is exactly what I would tell him. I've got time for one more. Paul asks me, what do you think of the slogan, the EU keeps the peace in Europe? I think the EU prompted the Balkan Wars by recognising Croatia in 1991. This was done very much at German behest, recognising their old wartime allies. It was a dreadful mistake that did lead to the Balkan Wars. And I think as far as 2014 was concerned, the democratically elected leader of Ukraine was brought down by people waving EU flags because the European Union wanted it to join. These are mistakes. The EU has done nothing to help the peace in Europe. That was NATO. That was NATO that did it. Right, I'm done here in America. I'll be back with you on Monday evening in London. It'll be Mark Stein next. First, though, let's have a look and see what the weather is going to give you. It's lovely here, by the way.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. Any wintry showers and strong winds tend to ease gradually overnight, leaving icy patches in their wake, but a drier and sunnier day is expected on Friday. There'll be some clear spells in the south and the east through the night, but during the evening, further rain, sleet and hill snow showers could cause issues for Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. As they fade away during the hours of darkness, they leave behind some slippery surfaces, some icy patches to wake up to on Friday. 0 to 1 Celsius for Scotland and Northern England, 2 to 4 for Northern Ireland, England and Wales. But Friday itself sees high pressure towards the southwest of the UK build across the country, and as a result, the wind finally eases And those showers also ease. There'll still be 1 or 2 around first thing, southwest Scotland, northwest England, into the Midlands. Otherwise, plenty of sunny spells, and that sunshine becomes widespread by the afternoon. Up and down the country, it's looking dry for a few hours, and with those sunny spells with lighter winds, it will feel pleasant. Temperatures reaching 10 Celsius in the south, 8 or 9 for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. But for Scotland, it turns cloudy by the end of the afternoon, as well as Northern Ireland. Outbreaks of rain move through here. Generally, it's light on and off rain, and that continues into the evening and overnight. As we start off the weekend, we'll see clear spells for England and Wales, cloudier conditions for Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's where the strongest breeze will be, and so frost-free, 6 or 7 degrees for Scotland and Northern Ireland first thing Saturday. It's looking closer to 0 for much of central and eastern England, where there will be a frost around, but plenty of bright skies. And actually for England and Wales, for parts of southern and eastern Scotland, a bright and dry day is expected. But for western Scotland, for Northern Ireland, it's windy. It's also cloudy, and there'll be some spots of rain with gales in exposed spots. Sunday sees rain move in from the west, but that dissipates by the afternoon.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe